I specialise in science-backed breathwork for mental, emotional well-being, as well as performance and mindset. And it's my mission to empower humanity to live better through this work, through the act of conscious breath. Really, it's been such a powerful tool for me in my journey, in my transformation, and my resilience, really, ultimately. Okay, so before we begin, I would love for everybody to just close their eyes, and we're going to take a few deep breaths together, and I'm going to invite you onto a little journey now. So we're going to close our eyes. I'm going to take some deep breaths, and we're going to sigh on the exhale. We're really going to let ourselves go. So inhaling. Really riding that wave of that out breath, letting everything go. Inhaling through the nose, from the belly. One more really long, gentle, relaxed out breath. Okay, keeping your eyes closed, I want you to, we're going to go back in time, back to a time before the advent of science, before the advent of the scientific method, when the only technology that existed was the technology of the Great Mother Earth, before we had physics, before we had chemistry, before we had biology, a time when we were living more connected with nature. From this place, how would you have perceived your reality? How would you have perceived the natural world around you? How would you have looked at yourself? How would you have looked at your breath? How would you have perceived your breath? Now, the reason I'm asking this is because before the scientific method came around and started telling us about the makeup of our reality, we would have been much more connected to our intuitive, primitive perception of reality as a spirit, as ourselves, as a spiritual being connected with the Great Spirit through nature. And this is something that I'm going to keep returning to throughout this practice, and throughout this workshop, because for me, the breath is our connection to spirit. And we're going to go into that in a bit more detail. There's many other parts of the breath that are absolutely essential to our way of life. The breath is our number one source of energy in the body. We need it to survive. It's the first thing we do as we come into this world. It's the last thing we do as we leave. It is this divine natural intelligence that flows through us. And when it doesn't anymore, we're dead. It's our way of detoxifying. It is our connection to our emotional body. The emotion and the breath are very deeply linked. Now, it is also a control of the nervous system. But really what I want to hone in on now is the fact that it is our connection to spirit. The ancients knew this, and there's many different traditions and lineages that knew this. For instance, the word respiration comes from the root word spiritus, which in Latin means spirit or breath. Even in the famous phrase aloha, the famous greeting aloha that is famous in Hawaii, it means the presence of the divine breath, or the breath of life, life force. And actually the Hawaiians of old would greet each other by putting their nose to each other's nose, and they would exchange a breath together. You know, it was a greeting. It literally, it was a greeting, and they were exchanging their spirit, exchanging their breath, their life force. And in fact, the kahunas, the elders of the Hawaiian tradition, the keepers of the secret knowledge, actually created the term ha'ol, which means without breath. And this now in the Hawaiian language is the term to refer to a Caucasian, actually means without breath, because they wouldn't do this greeting, which I think is awesome. And there's also much talk of the kahunas using the breath for creating spiritual energy, which we will go through in a moment. And it's in the Bible, even, you know, in the Bible it says, and the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being. So we can clearly see this connection between breath and spirit and life force in the Bible. And then even the term ruach in Hebrew, it refers to this spirit, or this great spirit, this Holy Spirit. Again, it mentioned here by Job, the very breath of God is in you. So there's been this deep connection with spirit and breath and life force in these ancient traditions. And we're going to continue looking at Native American, the ancient mystical Sufi tradition in Islam, and the Yogic tradition. But I just want to hone in a little bit for a moment on the fact that the breath is this doorway, it's this gateway, it's this bridge between the conscious and the subconscious parts of ourselves. And the reason for this is because the breath is actually one of the only systems in the body that can be consciously controlled and manipulated, but it's actually part of the automatic, unconscious parts, systems within the body that just happens. It just functions through us when we're not even thinking about breathing. So in this way, it's a gateway into this unconscious part of ourselves if we know how to tap into that. So for me, this kind of explains a little bit as to how we can reach these altered states of consciousness, these expanded, non-ordinary states of consciousness akin to psychedelic states or peak mystical states. And I experienced this in my first breathwork session when I was in India, and people around me were having full body orgasms and screaming and crying and completely left their bodies. And at the time I was like, how is this even possible just through breathing? We're having these expanded states of consciousness. And for me, what this represents is actually, this is a doorway into this super conscious part of ourself. This non-duality, this oneness, is a way that we can experience this is through the breath, and through going into this, because the breath is a doorway, a gateway into this deeper part of ourself. There's this immense spiritual energy and generative energy that we can create, this electromagnetic energy that we can create through the breath. And again, I experienced this. I was helping facilitate a training at the Kabbalah Center in London. And the first time the new facilitators actually went to facilitate on their members of the staff and members of the public, it was a very emotionally charged time because it was their first time facilitating, and people were nervous and wanting to do well. They'd invested into it, and as soon as everybody turned to their participant to begin to facilitate, all the lights in the room began to flicker, and we all looked at each other and we were like, wow, like this is the power that the breath holds. It's this immense electromagnetic force that was flickering the electricity and the lights. You know, it was incredible at the time. And this is this powerful healing element that we have through the breath. And this was picked up. I mean, it's something that has been going on for thousands and thousands of years, time immemorial. Forgive me, apologies, I can't pronounce that. However, back in the 1960s and late 1960s, early 1970s, an individual called Stanislav Groth, with his wife, began exploring altered states of consciousness using the breath, looking at these ancient traditions, these ancient lineages. And what they noticed, this is actually him and his wife here, by the way, and what they noticed is one of the main elements that was in almost every single of these ancient lineages was that they used the breath in different ways to get to these altered states of consciousness. Okay, so basically what happened is, oh, apologies. In 1971, the Misuse of Drugs Act came in. And Stanislav Groth was an LSD researcher. He had done thousands and thousands of studies working with LSD for its healing therapeutic potential. But when the Misuse of Drugs Act came in, they had to find other ways of finding these altered states. So this is a picture of them at Big Sur in California, and they began exploring with the power of the breath. And they created this form of breathwork called holotropic breathwork. And holotropic means moving towards wholeness. And what this is because ultimately through the breath, we can get into these deeper subconscious parts of ourselves. And what he was noticing happening was that these fragmented parts of ourselves, these unconscious traumas that we're holding in the energy body, holding in the emotional body, they began to be come back into a place of wholeness to be healed in the individual. And through these deep expanded states of consciousness, profound healing was happening. And this has led to a whole new tradition of breathwork in the West. Many different types of conscious connected deep dive breathwork, including rebirthing, which this is Leonard Orr, another individual who used the breath in this way. And interestingly, he was actually inspired by Babaji, who is this guru in the middle that you can see here. He had a vision by Babaji and to teach this breathwork style, and he actually involved using the water element. So they would have this rebirthing experience, and actually quite famously he was said to have relived his birth whilst doing breathwork in the bathtub, and up to he died quite recently, rest in peace, his soul. He was still doing breathwork in the bath, reaching these altered states of consciousness, which I just find incredible. So I want to talk a little bit now about the Native American tradition, a tradition enriched, absolutely deeply instilled into the culture is this connection with spirit, this great reverence for nature. I love this prayer here, this quote here: "All things share the same breath, the beast, the tree, the man, the air. It all shares." The air shares its spirit with the life, with all the life it supports. And I think it's so beautiful to see this interconnected way of observing the breath that is absolutely, seeing the spirit connected between all that exists, really. And I want to talk about this individual called George Catlin. And he was one of the first individuals actually to study the Native American tradition. He went on a bit of a pilgrimage to actually study 50 of the Native American tribes at this time. And although the tribes varied from region and customs and traditions, he did realize that they all had some almost superhuman-like traits. They all had these beautiful facial structures, these incredibly pristinely straight teeth, this great stature, and they didn't really seem to get ill. They didn't really seem to get sick. He once said that their teeth were as regular as the keys of a piano. And interestingly, the Native Americans, they attributed their great health to what they referred to as the great secret of life. And unsurprisingly, this great secret they referred to is the secret of breathing. And ultimately, what they were referring to is a very specific breathing habit, which is actually to breathe through the nose. They said that the breath inhaled through the mouth sapped the body of strength and deformed the faces and caused stress and disease, but breath inhaled through the nose kept the body strong and made the faces beautiful and prevented disease. And this is that quote. So interestingly, George Catlin actually was he grew up having many respiratory diseases. He had lots of issues growing up, ranging from, you know, different types of asthmatic disorders. And after his experience with the Native Americans, he basically became obsessed with breathing through his nose. He would tape his nose, his mouth shut at night. And amazingly, he actually overcame these. You know, he moved through this. He says, this insidious enemy that was attacking me at night, he evidently he moved through it. You know, he completely conquered this, and he lived to be 76, about double the age of the average life expectancy of that time. And he attributed this to this great secret of breathing, really. Okay, so I just really think this is beautiful. You know, these Native Americans, they would even, the mothers would even close the mouths of their babies when they slept. After feeding, they would literally close the mouth of their children, to make sure that they breathe through the nose. In the night, they would close the mouths of the children. And again, this is such an important thing, especially as we're growing up, to build these habits, these habitual breathing habits, because everybody has different breathing functionality issues. There's many different breathing disorders, and it's very rife in our society, especially with society being as stressful as it is. There's lots of different disorders around breathing that people are completely unaware of, and this is one of them. There is a real epidemic really around mouth breathing. And really, the nose is the evolutionarily designed organ for breathing. We shouldn't be breathing through the mouth. And there's a number of reasons for that, which I'm going to talk a little bit about now. But just interestingly, I just want to note that this isn't something that is just specific to these Native American tribes. 20 years later, he traveled down through the Andes, Argentina, Brazil, and he noticed that again, they all experienced these same vigorous health benefits: perfect teeth, beautiful facial structures, and again, they all had these medicinal breathing practices under their belt. And again, I love that this is actually an Indian proverb: the nose is for breathing, the mouth is for eating. It's so simple and it's so true. And I want to just think, well, you know, why was this not picked up back then? Like, why did people not listen to him? And you know, this is why we've got people like Napoleon Dynamite, like the clearest mouth breather on the planet, because we are, as a culture, we're very arrogant, and we had lots of prejudice towards these indigenous people of that time. We saw them as primitive and uncivilized, but actually they had this deep knowledge that we're only coming to understand now, and you know, it's only beginning to match up with real contemporary science now. So this is one of the things now it has been pretty much proven by science, and that mouth breathing has been shown to create craniofacial deformity, especially in young children. And this is why it's so important, if anybody has kids, to really keep on top of this. And I think I might have been
everyone. Sorry about that. I'm sure Nathan's going to be back with us shortly. We'll see what happened there. Hey, Nathan.
Hey man, I don't know what happened there. It put me into a breakout room with somebody.
Oh, that was interesting. All right, you might have meant
Let
to
me
be
get,
in there, but no, we'll let you carry on with your presentation for now. Sorry to disrupt your flow, there, brother.
that's all
Carry
right.
on.
Hopefully, yeah. Is that all good? Can you see everything okay? Yeah. Okay. We'll get forward to it. So yeah, it's been shown that there's this you know, there's this craniofacial deformity that can happen where we're breathing through our mouths, and it's affecting the airways, and it's causing our airways to become more restricted. And this is having a whole range of really serious um, you know, health disorders such as sleep apnea. This is a disorder where people are stopping breathing in the night, and some estimates are that actually a quarter of the population are experiencing this disorder, and often it's completely unnoticed and undiagnosed unless you have some form of snoring or something like this. And often people are choking on their airwaves effectively, and when you can't breathe through your nose, it's causing these serious issues. And some of the things that this is causing are, it's actually stopping the blood flow to the heart. So it's increasing chances of heart attack, heart disorders, also chronic fatigue, because the breath is how we experience how we receive energy, basically. So if we're not breathing properly through the night, if we're stopping breathing throughout the night, it can seriously decrease the amount of oxygen going into the cells and into our key organs. So we can be waking up with brain fog, where the brain hasn't been getting the energy it deserves. And if you're somebody who's been waking up with a dry mouth, you've been waking up tired, just have a little check in, like see if you can observe that your breath might be coming through your mouth whilst you sleep, you know. So there's these really interesting problems that might be coming as a result of the inability to breathe through your nose. And really, the nose is something that the more you breathe through it, the more the airways open up and the more you're able to come through it. Okay. And again, this is something called Myo Tape. This is a tape that you can actually put over your mouth when you're sleeping. And what it does is it just keeps your mouth shut whilst you sleep. And this is especially relevant if you've got something like asthma or sleep apnea, because it can be really, really powerful. Specifically, the ability to not, breathing through the mouth is actually disrupting something called your oral microbiome, which arguably has been one of the key drivers of teeth decay and cavities, and also dehydration. We dehydrate up to 40 to 60% higher when we're breathing through our mouth as opposed to breathing through our nose, and our body needs this water, especially the mouth, and this can really be causing havoc to your oral microbiome. And it's just amazing that this is all coming through now in science, but these Native Americans knew this. One of the other key things is the fact when we breathe through our nose, it releases something called nitric oxide. This is a bronchodilator, it's a vasodilator, it's antiviral, it's antifungal. And what that means is that it will actually decrease your blood pressure. It opens up the blood vessels and it increases our oxygen efficiency and transfer. So by breathing through the nose, there's this beautiful cascade of effects that happens to these different systems in the body. And again, it's been shown to reduce systems of asthma by reducing inflammation and actually by slowing down the breath, because the nose has got smaller holes. As you can see, I've got quite a big nose, but actually my nostrils are much smaller than my mouth. So what this means is that there's more resistance, and that means that we breathe a bit slower. And this sends signals to our body that we're safe, and we breathe more in alignment with our actual metabolic rate, which is extremely important, which I will come to in the future. So just to recap, the Native Americans' number one great secret to life is nose breathing. And some of the key reasons that are now coming through in contemporary science are craniofacial deformity, dehydration, oral microbiome, blood pressure decrease, and sleep apnea and asthma. So there's a real key reason here to be breathing through your nose, okay? Okay, great. So I want to talk about another ancient tradition, the Sufi tradition. If you don't know who they are, these are Islamic mystics. So they were kind of like the mystics of the time in Islam. They emphasize introspection and spiritual closeness with God. However, this closeness with God was to be found through the divine presence within man, starting with life. It wasn't about leaving and transcending. It was actually about looking at what's here, like in the structure of our DNA and in our hearts, to connect with God. And there are so many different Sufi breathing practices. Today we're going to be there's two key elements that I'm going to be talking about today, which are really, really essential for a whole cascade of different reasons that I'm going to be going through. But today we're really going to be focusing on these two elements. Now, probably the most famous Sufi that you may have heard of is an individual called Rumi, and just such an incredible poet, such an amazing way with words. And an incredibly famous, this is from the 13th century, and his work is many people have heard of him, and he still exists in a consciousness right now. He has a real legacy, and some of the beautiful ways he puts it, in every breath you strip naked, just like a winter, the joy of spring will grow from within. Again, referring to this beauty of allowing the breath to flow out of us, creating this new space to come through and grow through us. And I love this. Now is where love breathes. Wow, like such potent wisdom in 5 words, like the power of now, the power of love, the power of breath. I just love it. Again, this is a beautiful quote. Breath to a Sufi is a bridge between himself and God. It is a rope for him hanging down to earth, attached to the heavens. The Sufi climbs up by the help of this rope. Beautiful. It's this, the Sufi uses the breath as a connection to source, a connection to spirit. I think it's just gorgeous. Now, another quote from this Hazrat Inayat Khan, an amazing dude, like he's got such wisdom in many of his teachings, and he's only actually 150 years old, his teachings. But breath is life, and its work is to take the inner condition out externally, and to take the external conditions into one's inner being. When exhaling, the harmony or inharmony of the soul is brought out. Its influence first working on one's mind, then one's feelings, and working on the body and the surroundings. So what's in, as we exhale, we release that energy outwards and it interacts with our environment in an intimate way. When inhaling, the conditions of the external plane, harmony or inharmony, with the thoughts and feelings of the external plane are drawn into the body, into the mind, into the soul, which sets the soul either in calmness or disturbance. So he's referring to this exchange, this intimate exchange from the external world coming inwards to affect our mind, affect our body, affect our soul, our spirit, to basically ascertain whether we'll be calm or disturbed. And for me, this is referring to the fact that the breath is inextricably linked to our emotional body, our emotional state. The breath changes erratically whenever we're angry, we're frustrated, we're fearful, we're worried, when we're elated, when we're peaceful, when we're calm, the breath changes. And this is interesting because it's also a doorway, right? It's a gateway into our emotional state. So we can hack into our emotional state by regulating our breathing. Now, there's one key element here that I really want to focus in on, and that is the categorization of breath as fine or subtle. This is basically referring to the breath as being very calm, very silent, very peaceful, very smooth, very gentle, very effortless. He says here, one may just watch the rhythm of the breath continually. After a while, there may be a tendency for the breath to become more and more refined. Then one will find that it's difficult to watch and there is no need to observe the breath when one enters the real silence. And he's referring here to when we go into these states of deep meditation, and actually it feels as if we're not even breathing. The breath is coming so smoothly, so subtly through us that it's difficult to watch the breath. And he's referring to this as the real silence, which I think is beautiful. And I love, as men enters the silence, so does the silence enter into him. As he unites with the universe, so does the universe manifest in him. I think that's gorgeous. And again here, Rumi, again, the soul lives there in the silent breath. What a guy. Powerful, powerful, powerful way of explaining things. And I love this, this concept, this subtle, fine, gentle, smooth, effortless breath. It is carried across many traditions. If you may have heard of Lao Tzu, or the writer of the Tao Te Ching, a Taoist book, and renowned as one of the wisest books ever written. And he says, a perfect man breathes as if he's not even breathing. And I love this. It's like, imagine breathing so smoothly, so calmly, that it's as if we're not even breathing. Now, if you compare this to how most people are breathing in Western society, actually, we're breathing in the chest, we're breathing very rapidly, it's very forceful, it's shallow. We're not breathing in this subtle, relaxed, effortless, gentle way. And this is really essential to our well-being. It down-regulates the nervous system, and it effectively stimulates the parasympathetic rest and digest response. It tells our body that we're safe. So by emulating this breath and breathing in this way, we build habits where actually our habitual breathing begins to slow down, and we begin to breathe in this way that these great ancient traditions have been explaining. And again, another ancient tradition, the ancient samurai tradition. In fact, almost every martial art tradition has this as an essential part of their being, and their practice is to establish this habitual breathing that is very calm and smooth. And actually, in the warrior training of the samurais, part of their training would be to put a feather in front of their nose to see if the feather would move. And if the feather would move, they would have failed their training. And again, this is just showing you how subtle and how calm the breath should be flowing through us when we're in these real optimal states. So how does this concept of fine and subtle breathing match up with contemporary science? Well, this is firstly something that is linked to something called chronic overbreathing. And as I mentioned, when we're breathing rapidly and we're in this state of like hyperventilation mode, where our sympathetic nervous system is too active, basically, because trauma from society and stresses from society are just boosting our adrenals. They're making our nervous system much more activated, upregulating it, like when we're in a fight or flight response, when a lion is attacking us, or our boss is shouting at us, or someone's trying to get the rent from us. We have this same response, and what that means is that we breathe a lot quicker. It's something called hyperventilation syndrome. Okay, so many people have this. Like, I do a lot of work with corporates, and the majority of people are experiencing some form of hyperventilation syndrome like this. And what this means is that they're breathing very quick, rapidly, and it's being detrimental to their health. They're blowing off too much carbon dioxide. And when you're blowing off too much carbon dioxide in this way, what happens is that our oxygen efficiency and transfer in the body decreases. So our oxygen, it's very paradoxical. When we breathe too quickly, we breathe too fast, we breathe hyperventilating, our body actually gets less oxygen. It's super weird. But the organs receive less oxygen when we breathe like this. So by breathing slower, we actually get more oxygen into the cells, and our body can harmonize in a much more, our body can function in a much more harmonized way. Now, this is the second element that I want to talk about, okay? And this is the concept of rhythmic breathing, okay? So by breathing practices, the Sufi sets his breath to the proper rhythm, and when it becomes a habit, the Sufi's whole life becomes orderly and regular, because the rhythm in time becomes a habit of the breath. And while awake or asleep, the breath goes on rhythmically, keeping pulsations in rhythm on which his health entirely depends. The rhythm so produced by the breath keeps the thoughts in order, the will powerful, the memory in order, the feelings normal, and thereby all one's affairs in life come into perfect and proper order. Okay, so for me, this is talking about the fact that actually we don't want our breath to be erratic. One of the first things that changes, as I mentioned, when we're frustrated or we're angry or we're upset or we're peaceful, is our breath will change, our breathing rate changes. And this can cause lots of different effects in the body. Different systems can change because they're very linked to the breath. But when we create this very beautiful rhythmic breathing, when actually it's these beautiful swinging oscillations, what this does is it creates this beautiful, coherent, harmonized energy of our being. And these different systems can come into more optimization ultimately. And specifically what I want to talk about is a practice, a Sufi practice called awareness of the heart. Now, for me, in my journey, for me to actually be aware of my heart, to feel the heart beating in my chest, to really feel my heart beating in my chest when I'm in this place of stillness and silence and peace, my breath actually has to be very fine. It has to be very subtle and gentle and calm. And in that stillness, in that subtleness, we can tune into the heart and we can tune into this beautiful rhythmic breathing. And this is why I've mentioned this fine and this rhythmic capacity to breathe, because it allows us to connect with our heart space. Okay. Now, again, how does this match up with modern science? Now, I'll put a picture of Holy Grail here, because this practice for me is like the Holy Grail of breathing practices. It's absolutely amazing. And it's called Resonant Frequency or Heart Coherence Breathing. Okay. Now, what this is basically, as I mentioned, the breath is an oscillating system. Almost every system in your body is oscillating. Everything is energy, everything is frequency, everything is resonating in different frequencies. Now, your blood pressure, it oscillates. Your nervous system, it oscillates. Your cardiovascular system, it oscillates. We live in a world of duality. Obviously, everything is going to oscillate, right? So the interesting thing is that actually the breathing is one of the systems in the body that is an oscillating system, but it can be consciously controlled. It can be consciously manipulated, which offers an amazing opportunity, right? Because we can manipulate this manipulate this oscillating breathing capacity in such a way that it becomes a resonant frequency. So it's basically working at its optimal functionality. And when this occurs, all these other systems, the nervous system, the cardiovascular system, even the cognitive function, become entrained to this more harmonized, coherent oscillation. And you can see this in the heart rate of individuals, the heart rate variability. When an individual does this technique and taps into this rhythmic, it's a rhythmic breath ultimately, and it's almost identical to this Sufi practice. And all we're doing is we're harmonizing the in-breath and the out-breath such that we inhale for 5 seconds, we exhale for 5 seconds. So it's this deep harmonization of this oscillating system. And what happens here is that the nervous system becomes harmonized. It balances the nervous system. So if you're somebody who's very stimulated, or you're super lazy, in fact, and you need to find some balance, this is such a powerful practice. It improves something called heart rate variability, which is pretty much the #1 key performance indicator for the body's ability to handle stress. So pretty much all medical institutes will look at this as an indicator of the body's ability to handle stress. And what that is basically information comes in and, we see a lion shouting at us. Our nervous system gets upregulated. Oh, hang on, I've seen a baby now. So my nervous system is going to be calm because there's this cute baby and it makes me feel calm and relaxed. And this breathing, when we inhale, when we exhale, it harmonizes in this way. When we harmonize the length of the in-breath and the out-breath, it harmonizes. So there's this rhythmic oscillation happening that is very subtle, it's very fine, and it's very smooth. And it is basically pulling us into this very coherent state. There's lots of science that backs this up now, ranging, improving performance and cognitive function, concentration, shooting performance, ability to handle physiological arousal in anticipation of psychological stress, psychosocial stress, blood pressure. For instance, I've actually been teaching this to my mum. So my mum's been having heart palpitations, and I've been teaching this to her as a way for her to harmonize her heart rate. And it's doing wonders for her, absolute wonders for her, to help her on this journey. So I thought what would be nice, because this is such a powerful practice. I don't have much time, but I would really love to do this practice today with you. I'm going to play some music that actually we recorded a couple of weeks ago with my friend next to this beautiful river. And just before we go into this practice, I just want to mention this another beautiful quote by Rumi here. There is one way of breathing that is shameful and constricted. Then there's another way, a breath of love that takes you all the way to infinity. again, just capsulating this so well, like when we're breathing, when we're feeling shame, when we're feeling frustration, when we're feeling constricted, it's erratic, it's shallow, it's closed. But when we're breathing with love, when we're feeling this overwhelming gratitude, appreciation, love, the breath fills this space, this infinite space within, and it creates this beautiful, nourishing energy. The inhale is this opportunity to welcome in all this new life force, this new breath, this new potentiality. So when we do this practice, that's what we're welcoming in. I want you to envision that you're breathing into every cell in your body this feeling of love, this feeling of appreciation, this gratitude. Like, connect and let that every cell in your body fill up with this feeling of appreciation and love. Okay. And then as we breathe out, we're just letting go, we're just relaxing, and we're just switching off. We're just letting all of that beautiful energy just settle into the body. Okay. And when we do this practice, it's not about volume, it's just subtle. And remember, we've mentioned how important it is for the breath to be fine and smooth. So we want it to be very smooth, very gentle, very calm. Okay. So we're going to give this a go. I'm just going to put some music on and we shall begin. Okay, so hopefully you can hear this music behind me. Lawrence, if you can hear, can you give me a thumbs up, please? Great. Okay, beautiful. So you can hear with this music behind, there's this oscillation. It's coming down now. And now it's going up. And it's coming down. So I would like you to harmonize your breath with this flow. So we're going to inhale. Slowly exhale through the nose, all through the nose. Inhaling. See if you can let the shoulders soften, the jaw soften. And exhaling, letting everything relax. Inhaling. And exhaling. So we're getting this rhythmic flowing breath going. See if you can breathe up into your heart space, opening up your heart space, inhaling. Very fine, very gentle, very subtle, letting go. This infinity within. And exhaling. You can put your hands on your heart even and connect with your heart space as if you're breathing through your hands in your heart. Filling up with this loving energy. Surrendering to this beautiful rhythmic breath. Last few rounds, so really letting yourself go. Okay, beautiful. So already you might feel a little bit of difference, but this is something that I invite you to practice a little bit more often. You know, you can even put this, I can send out the music to you all, and what you can do is you can put this on when you're meditating, or even just throughout the day, and begin to bring this habit. You know, that we mentioned the Sufi habit of making this part of your everyday breathing. That's what you want to be working towards. So slowing down this breath just a little bit. You notice it's a little bit slower, and that allows for all of these beautiful cascade of benefits to happen. Okay. And again, final quote by the Sufis, which really encapsulates this presentation so well. There is much that is in common to the science of electricity and the science of breath. The day is not very far off when science and mysticism both will meet on the same ground in the realization of the electricity which is hidden in the breath. So beautiful. And again, this is a practice that actually is quite similar to a technique used by the Buddha. And this is a practice called anapanasati meditation, which means mindfulness of breath. And what this, the Buddha says that this is actually the technique that he used or would use and recommends to be used as a tool to reach enlightenment, to actually reach this place. And what it is when it's called mindfulness of breath because we can bring our complete attention to the breath. But what we do is we keep taking out the effort, keep taking out the energy to the point where it's so subtle and it's so slow that the breath is as long as it can possibly be. We reach our full capacity. So it's, you know, it can be minutes inhaling, minutes exhaling. And we just taking out the pressure, taking out the effort just a little bit more with each breath. Okay, I'll do the practice with you right now, but we don't have as much time. Okay, so but yeah, it's really worth having a look into this and harmonizing this rhythmic, fine, subtle breath. And you might have seen some pictures of this guy. He's popped up on social media for me quite a lot. And this is a mummified monk. Now, the local people to this area don't believe that this man is dead. They believe that he actually transcended the physical. He stopped breathing, but he transcended the physical. His breath, it became so silent and so gentle and so expansive that actually he fell into that place that the Native Americans referred to as the real silence. Sorry, the Sufis referred to as this real silence. You know, make of that as you wish, but I think it's quite cool. And the final tradition that I want to speak about today is the Yogic tradition. This was me when I went to India on my first trip, and went on this healing journey, really. And I got taken out about 50 kilometers out into the desert by an individual that I met to meet this Baba, this spiritual teacher, this spiritual guru. And this is the Baba that I went to meet. And you can see he's an incredibly old man. He was referred to as the old Baba, actually. They said locally that he's 120 years old, but you know, you can't really trust any of that information. You know, they don't have such good record keeping out there. But anyway, he was a very, very old man, and you can see this box that he lived in, this tiny door here. And this room was no bigger than 10 foot by 10 foot. And all that was inside this room was a wooden bed and a fire in the middle. Now, I couldn't even sit inside this room. It was so smoky that the fumes was so intense for me. I couldn't even sit inside. Yet this gentleman was 100 years old and sitting inside, having a joke, laughing, chilling. And I couldn't get how is this guy still alive? How is he living in these states, you know, when the breath is so important? Now, one of the things that I think can attribute to this guy's health is something called pranayama. You know, this is one of the pillars of yoga. There's I believe 8 pillars of yoga, and this is one of them. And this is working with the control of your life force. So in the yogic tradition, your breath is your life force. It's your vital energy. It's your chi. And by working with the breath in this way, in different ways, there's thousands of different breathing techniques that we can experiment with. But actually what it is said to do is extend your life. And pranayama literally means life extension or life force control. There's many different techniques. And one of the reasons why I think that this actually, well, there's 2 reasons I believe why this works. Number one is, by working with this on a daily basis, we're raising this pranic energy, this life force vital capacity within us. We're raising it in our body, and we're keeping that heightened state, which is very powerful. You know, this is why we can experience these altered states of consciousness, because we're working with this life force vital energy and raising the charge. Now, the other element to this is actually using the breath as a tool to slow down the breath. Using pranayama as a tool to slow down the breath. I mentioned many times now the importance of slower breathing. And the reason for that is, I want to give an analogy to explain this. If you look at a car, the mileage on a car, any car that has hundreds and thousands of miles on it, the more likelihood that car is to break down and to, you know, to die ultimately. Now, I would like to kind of equate that kind of thinking to your heart. Your heart rate, your heart is beating regularly every couple, you know, every second pretty much your heart is beating. However, you can look at that like the mileage on a car. You know, we live for maybe 80 to 100 years. The heart is going to get tired after a certain amount of time, just like a car will get tired after a certain amount of usage. Now, when we can control our life force, when we can work with the breath to slow down the breath, what happens is it slows down our heart rate. The heart rate slows down significantly. Now, if you look at free divers, when they're underwater for minutes and minutes, their breathing rate, their heart rate decreases so much. So in a way, this is kind of like decreasing the mileage on a car. You know, the car will last for longer if you drive it less. Just similarly, your life will last for longer if it has less heartbeats. And the way that we can have less heartbeats is if we slow down our breathing, so we're more calm when we're more relaxed. And these pranayama techniques, working with the breath in different ways, are pretty much the way that we can do this. And finally, the Indian tradition has a great tradition of something called Ayurveda, which is a healing science. Ultimately, it's a health science working with herbs. It's very holistic. It works with the breath. It works with different diets. There's many different elements to it. And really what it's about is detoxifying. Now, I wonder if any of you can guess actually how high the percentage of detoxification that occurs in your body just through breathing alone. Would anybody like to make a guess? Like, you can post in the chat if you feel. Oh, in fact, I've just pressed it by accident, so I'll let you know. So it's actually 70%. 70% of the toxins in your body are removed just through breathing alone, which blew my mind, because I thought actually feces or urine would be how we release most of our toxins. But actually that's just not true. Most of the toxins are released through the breath. It's a vehicle of releasing and letting go, which I just think is amazing, really. Okay, so I was going to do a practice here, but I think we're probably running out of time. So I'm going to just round things up. Okay, so yeah, so I've got 3 minutes. So number one, what conclusions can we take? So the first one is shut your mouth. So breathe through your nose. It's absolutely essential to be breathing through your nose for all of those reasons that I mentioned. Number two, breathe finely, breathe smoothly, gently, calmly. Number three, breathe slowly, slow down the breath. There's no rush. And in that, it slows down our heart rate and it will extend your life. It can allow you to breathe for a lot longer. And breathe rhythmically. That harmonizes the nervous system. It harmonizes the cardiovascular system. It brings us into this beautiful place of coherence with all these different systems in the body. It's amazing that these ancient wisdom, these ancient traditions knew this stuff before science. But the final and key conclusion that I really want to make from this whole presentation is this. We are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. Okay? And what I mean by that is, I think before science, before we had these different ways of validating things, we would have looked at our natural world and seen our place in natural world more in a connection with spirit and more in a connection to nature. And I think so many of the issues that we face today are really around this fact that we've kind of forgotten who we are. We've forgotten that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. We've forgotten this part of ourselves. We've kind of lost our connection to spirit and God in many ways, whatever that is for you. You know, I don't want to make any weird connotations around that, but I really believe that the breath has a powerful part to play in the transformation of our world and transformation of our society into you know, this place, this new ground, this place of more harmony within society, with our planet and with ourselves. Someone said to me yesterday, actually, that the breath is like a mystical jolt. I love it. It's like it can give you this mystical experience, this peak experience, and that can actually kind of be a bit of a spark, and you know, real help people to remember that there's something else here, there's something else going on, and that there's something else beyond the scenes that maybe not all science can explain. And I really think that this is a key learn from these ancient traditions, and from the power of the breath. Okay, so I really hope that you enjoyed the presentation today and took some key learns from it. I went through quite a lot, but I hope a couple nuggets stuck and a couple seeds were planted. Just before I finish, has anybody got any questions? Would anybody like to ask any questions today? Also,
like a little animated character.
pardon? What did you say?
That was Amy in the background here, mate. She was just saying she loves this quote and she really enjoys your presence and the way that you've delivered
Great.
that workshop, brother. Thank you, and me too. Hey, that was really awesome. It's nice to be taken through how breath has been used and sort of adopted, or I guess just presenced in so many different traditions and cultures and customs. And there looks like there is a question here from Elenita. My question would be how to address specific organs through breath.
Ooh, that's a beautiful one. So, I mean, to be honest with you, I'm not an expert in this, but there is a whole tradition around this, and it's basically called Qigong. Qigong. This is like the Chinese healing science, energy work. It's like Pranayama. It's like deeply connected to Tai Chi, is a little bit more relevant to that. And there is a whole science around this, and it's about working with the power of intention and channeling the power of the breath. And you know, in a simple way, what you can do is actually, as I mentioned in the presentation, the Sufis see the breath as this intimate exchange from your reality. You know, we're taking in fungus, we're taking in oxygen, all from Mother Nature, and also we're breathing out this stuff that actually can end up being useful to Mother Nature. But the reason I mention this is because actually this is a transmutation of energy. So the way I like to believe it and the way I like to view it, and I think many healing practices use this, energy healing practices use this, is you can even put your hands onto places where you want to bring the spirit of the breath to in a healing way. And you can use the power of intention and this power of realizing the power of the breath to flow into that space. By putting your hands there, you create an energetic connection to that area. Your awareness goes to that place, and wherever your attention goes, your energy flows. So by putting your hand, you know, say I want to work with healing my heart, I can put my hands on my heart and I can ask for this power to come through me, and actually breathe as if I'm breathing in and out through my heart with the power of love. And I believe that can you know, either give it the energy that it needs. If you feel it's an organ that needs to receive energy, then maybe you can breathe the energy in. But also, if you are wanting to maybe feel like you need to release something, then maybe you can use the out breath to release that energy instead. So using it as an intentional tool, I believe, can be a way of working with that. But have a look at Qigong and Tai Chi as a tool for this. Is there any other questions? Great question, by the way.
Great answer, apparently. A very beautiful approach to my question from Elenita. Thanks, Nathan.
If there's no more
Yeah.
questions, I'd just like to say that if I am available for one-to-ones and workshops and different brand and media kind of work. So if anybody feels called to reach out to me, then please go ahead and drop me an email or check out the website, and I'll be happy to get in touch.
Awesome. And as we've been doing with all of our speakers and artists, there's a code or a link to a sheet of codes in the chat that basically is a way to support Nathan and Nathan's work by making a contribution. And it's a contribution to support the festival, but a portion of that will go to Nathan to support his work. So we're all about sharing the nutrients here and sharing the love. So if you've really enjoyed Nathan's presentation and you'd like to support him further in what he's doing, that's a really great way to do so. And support the festival at the same time. Thanks so much, Nathan. It's been really awesome to have you with us, brother. It was a great presentation. And we're gonna just stop the recording.